So, hi everyone. This is Product Fit, Airtime's podcast series with exceptional product leaders telling behind the scenes stories. I'm Akos Kiss-Dozsai. I'm the CEO of Airtime, a user engagement platform empowering product teams to improve product adoption by rapid validation of user needs. Today, my guest is Marty Cagan. So, Marty, today I'd like to focus on the role of the product manager and the place in the product model. In the Transformed workshop that I had the pleasure of attending last week, you brought a quote from Ben Horowitz saying that product teams are only as good as their product managers. And if I recall that correctly, you started as a developer, but then transferred into a product manager role. And I'd be super excited and interested to understand what skills you had to master to become a good product manager.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty common path to go from engineering to product. I definitely wasn't the first and not the last. There's many people that do that. But people come into product from all different areas. It is true, though, that coming from engineering to product, there's a lot of new skills most engineers need. I needed for sure. Certainly you bring some advantages. The technical foundation is pretty useful. I still think it's a terrific foundation, and I encourage many, many people to pursue a degree in computer science. I think it's very useful. That said, I know for me, I didn't understand anything related to the sales and marketing side of a company. It's referred to as go-to-market. It's extremely important. How does your product actually make it into the hands of your customers? A lot of engineers, we just focus on building, and we trust that one way or another, it makes it to a customer. But it turns out it's pretty hard often to get it to customers. And so the whole go-to-market I had to learn. I also didn't know anything about the financial side, the different KPIs, the costs, the monetization strategies, the contributions the product makes, the numbers that a product has to hit to even become a profitable product. I didn't understand those things. Everybody knows there's something there, but I didn't know much. And so I had to learn finance, basic finance. And it's true. I think this is not a good thing. But in the computer science program that I did, and I think it was pretty typical, there was no accounting courses, no finance courses, nothing like that. So I really knew nothing. And I had to read some very basic books. I got some tutoring. But the point is, everybody comes with a different starting point. So luckily for me, the real lucky thing I had was there was somebody who agreed to coach me. And the first thing they did is assess me. So they knew I didn't know any of these things. There were many other things I didn't know. I was building products for developers, and I was a developer, but it's not the same as actually visiting your customers. And so the person coaching me knew that and made sure I would go out and visit customers before I made any decisions. So this is typical for an engineer that wants to move into product. But I tell the engineers, this is good knowledge, even if you decide to go back into engineering.
And these are super interesting skills and important skills. You mentioned finance or go-to-market. These are things that we can learn. Do you think that there are certain personality traits as well that come extremely handy and useful if you become a product manager?
Oh, absolutely. It's a much harder thing to say is if there's any, personality traits that are really prevent you from being a product. There are some people that I meet that really don't want to learn. They don't want to learn new things. They don't want to think hard about hard problems. And of course, there's nothing, I don't know what to do with those people. I don't know how to help them. But most people aren't like that. If they want to learn, they'll do that. So there are some skills though. Certainly the ability to learn and consider how you might apply new technologies is incredibly valuable. That's why people like a lot of companies, Google is a good example, Meta is another, Netflix is another. They like product people that have a technical background because they've already shown that they like to do that. What else? You're looking for people that are very curious and not afraid to learn new things and ask why, and go talk to customers and ask them why they don't like this service or why they unsubscribed and engage. So you have to, I think it's very valuable to be curious. I think it's hard to imagine being a product person if you're not a lifetime learner. If you don't like learning new things, that's pretty much what we do every day, is learn new things. I mean, obviously, generative AI is just the latest new thing, but our industry has a constant stream of new technologies that come out, and you have to learn, like, is generative AI something that can help your company and help your customers? Is blockchain technology something that can help your customers? If not, we leave it behind. If it is, we embrace it. So product people, this is what we do. And I think that's actually the best part of being a product person.
It's probably the most interesting part as well, that you get to learn new stuff. There are a number of people, or a part of product managers, to put it that way, who don't come from the developer angle, but have like another entry point in there. Do you think it's valuable for them to still like learn into a bit of development?
I do. In fact, I always recommend, if somebody wants to be a product person who's never been a developer before, never been an engineer, I say, if you've never taken a course in a programming language, just take one. Just sign up and take one. It's remarkable how much it really helps somebody to start to view technology and its role in a different way. So I think that is absolutely essential. I also tell them, if they've never had a course in statistics, they need to take a course in statistics, because so much of what we do is informed by the data. And pretty much every product manager today is a data product manager. And so, making sure you have a foundation in statistics and enough math to really understand the data you're looking at and make reasonable judgments.
Excellent. So then once you became a product manager, you very quickly became a product leader. And I'm curious about this transition of being like the first line product manager and moving from there to someone who manages product teams. And how do you think you became a good product leader?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to get through there, and it's normally not just individual contributor to leader. There are several sort of intermediate roles. Like, I am a huge fan, and I was working at companies that had this, and a lot of the major tech companies have a role called the GPM, Group Product Manager. And that's a perfect way, in my opinion. It's the ideal way to decide whether you want to go into product leadership, or if you want to stay as a creator of creating great products. So they're both fantastic careers. I mean, some of the best product people I know are not product leaders. They're individual contributors. They're usually what's called a principal product manager, but a very senior individual contributor. But a group product manager is when you basically are responsible for a product. So you still are a product manager, but you have one or two people that you're also responsible for developing. And so usually we set that up when it's something that's a tightly related thing. Like, you might have 3 product teams all building a native iOS app. And so they're very closely related. So one of those product managers is the manager of the other 2. And that way they can stay very tight. And, holistically, it's one app. You want to make sure it works like one app. But on the other hand, the person is able to develop those skills and decide fundamentally if they want to take their career in the direction of, when you become a product leader, your product is no longer your product. Your product is now your people. And that's a big difference. And I know just as many people that try it and decide they don't like it as try it and decide they do like it. So you really want, this is something that I think is important in good product companies, is you don't want people to become a product leader because that's the only way they think they can make more money.
Okay,
You
so you
want
offer
them.
like parallel tracks for.
Yeah, it's called the dual career ladder model. It applies to engineers, designers, and product managers. And the idea is you can make just as much money as an individual contributor if you're good.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's move a level deeper. There's an interesting survey that I came across. It was published a few years ago, actually, 2019, from the Pragmatic Institute, and they surveyed product managers. And among other topics, they asked them what product managers spend their time with. I think that's like an eternal question. A lot of content is written about this, but the answers were fascinating here. Product managers said they spend 40 hours a month in meetings and 25 hours with emails. When you were product manager back in the days, can you remember back what was your split of time? What did you spend your time with on an average given day?
Yeah, but first, I mean, you have to any one of these surveys. First of all, surveys are incredibly problematic. You have to really look carefully to decide if any survey is any good. Pragmatic is a very old company that doesn't actually teach the product model. They teach what they call a product manager. We don't even call a product manager. So these are feature team product managers.
Okay, so that's the old style.
And the point is, a feature team product manager is a fancy name for a project manager. That's the truth. And if you're a project manager, is it surprised if you spend 40 hours a week in meetings? What do you think project managers do? So you have to take all that kind of survey stuff with a big grain of salt. That said, so let's pull out feature team product managers, which are really project managers, and forget the old pragmatic model stuff, because that's from literally like, I don't know, 90s, maybe the 1980s. It is really old. And let's talk about a real product manager that's trying to really do their job. It is a very common problem that they are spending too much time on project management responsibilities. Now, a little bit of project management is normal. In fact, talk to any CEO and they'll tell you they spend a good amount of time coordinating, and these are project management activities. So any leader has some amount of any type, has some amount of project management. But when it gets to the point where you're doing 40 hours a week, you're not a product person at this point, unless you're willing to work 80 hours a week, which is not recommended at all. But that's what some people do. It's true. Some people try to do both jobs. They do the project management during the day and they do the product management at night, because they aren't in meetings, so they can actually do the product management work. But most people, the right answer is no, it's very limited project management. In fact, we have project managers. So the point is, a good product manager is coached to use their project manager. We often call them delivery managers, but we use those delivery managers. They go to the meetings so that the product manager's primary obligation is to work with the designer and the tech lead on what you need to build next. Yes, so, and of course, that's not meetings. That's literally doing your creative work. You are sitting there, you're playing with prototypes, you're testing those prototypes with users. So that's what product managers do. And I know that I have coached, I don't know, I'm certain many hundreds of product managers to get better at this balance between the product work and the project management work.
And this actually is a very good segue to my next question, because I guess at the end of the day, each product manager has to prioritize the tasks on their desk, right? And they have to say, this is absolutely essential for my role, for my job to do. What do you think are these essential tasks of a product manager are?
Well, I mean, and so does a designer, and so does an engineer.
Yes.
Because these are creator roles. They are trying to create products. So, for example, an engineer that doesn't have time, the most of their day to writing code is probably I don't know what they're not going to be able to get a lot done. A designer that doesn't have most of their day designing, which is very much one of the main activities in product discovery, is not going to be very helpful, right? And same with a product manager. If they're not spending most of their day helping to figure out what needs to be built, the product manager and designer, they primarily focus on the discovery activities, figuring out what's next to build. And the engineers primarily focus on the delivery activities, which is building that stuff. But the developers also spend a little time every day on discovery activities. And the product manager and designer spend a little time every day on the delivery activities, mostly answering questions that come up that were not thought about until the engineers identified a missing use case or something like that. So that's what we do all day. If you're not able to spend the majority of your day creating that product, then your product's probably in trouble. Because if you're not worried about that, who is?
Yeah. And you also bring a very interesting benchmark about product discovery. You say that a product manager should spend about 4 hours every day on product discovery, and on a weekly basis, at least 3 times 1 hour interaction with customers. I'm curious about where the numbers come from, and what's the thinking behind that.
Well, let's talk about each number. The thinking behind 4 hours a day is really simple. It's the same sort of thinking like, how many hours a day does an engineer really need to be able to code to make progress on a product? How many hours a day does a designer? So empirically, if you don't have 4 hours, and remember, everybody's got some other stuff. They go to lunch with their friends, or if they're working from home, they've got other errands to do. Or they have company all hands meetings to attend. There's always other stuff. So 4 solid hours a day is actually pretty good. I do try to encourage people to have even more, especially if they're working on something really hard and big that takes really thoughtful time. But, realistically, that's empirical. If you don't have 4 hours a day, it's going to be hard to make sufficient progress. There are some people that are amazing, and they can do in a couple hours what would take me, 10 hours. So there are some people, but that's, these are outliers. Most people need the majority of their day to focus on these activities. And there's a lot of activities involved in product discovery. I mean, you've got to meet with your stakeholders and talk about their constraints. You have to meet with the engineers about the enabling technology. You've got to constantly talk with the user researchers about questions you're trying to get answered. You're talking with data analysts about understanding some of the data trends. I mean, there is a lot of work in product discovery. And you mentioned one of the many things, which is we say if you're working on a user-facing product, not every product is, but if you're working on a user-facing product, the minimum is 3 one-hour sessions a week. Because if you don't have those 3-hour sessions a week, how are you going to get the feedback you need on your products? And we also do data tests, but the data tests are great for telling us if something works, but they're not good for telling us why it doesn't work. And so the face-to-face tests are meant to be a minimum at getting a good answers as to why that stuff isn't working. Now, if I'm working on a major redesign with a company, instead of 3 one-hour sessions a week, it's probably 10 one-hour sessions a week. So, 3 is the minimum.
Yeah. I'm just wondering, all these interactions, you got to find the right type of users. You got to organize meetings with them. You have to analyze what comes out of it. What have you seen good examples of companies that put a nice infrastructure and process around?
Yeah. No, it's totally normal. But this is what user researchers do. So this is why I love our user researchers. They are there to enable rapid, frequent testing with our customers. They help us make sure we're getting the right people at the right companies and the right background for what we're looking for. For products, we need to get the right kind of users working on the right kind of tasks. They make sure we're prepared. They make sure we're interpreting the results well. I love user researchers for sure.
Got it. Got it. You also mentioned in the Transform workshop that most innovation comes from engineers. And I'd like to talk about them now too a little bit. I'm curious, why do you think the innovation mostly comes from them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the higher order point is that products come from product teams. They don't come from product managers. They don't come from designers. They don't come from your customers. They don't come from your executives. They come from teams. So, but then where does the innovation really come from? Most of the time, it does come from your engineers. And it's not a mystery as to why. You know, the engineers are working with the enabling technology every single day. So they are in the best position to see what's just now possible. And that's really where most innovation comes from. It's combining a real customer problem with something that is just now possible. I can't tell you how often. This is why, by the way, the magic happens when we do those 3-hour tests I described, but we bring along an engineer. And I can't tell you how often the engineer will see something during that test that the product manager and designer didn't even know was a possibility. The engineer will say something like, we could just eliminate this whole step. And the product manager designer like, how can we do that? How is that? We need this information. And the engineer might say, well, we could actually derive this information. We have enough stuff stored that, and a lot of times the product manager will say, why didn't you tell us? And the engineer will say, well, nobody showed me what you're trying to build. So that's why they are working. And if you just look at any of your favorite products, whether it's an iPhone or whether it's a Peloton or whether it doesn't matter what you tell me your favorite product, I bet there was an engineer behind that with the real innovation.
Absolutely. My next question was about like where to include engineers in the discovery process. You mentioned you can and should invite them to user sessions. Are there any particularly valuable parts in product discovery where developers should be involved?
Well, the more the better is the truth, and the earlier the better is the truth. However, remember the developers, their day job is to build the products we've already done the discovery on. So they need to build, test, and deploy those products. So we're always sensitive to the amount of time that they have available for discovery. The main reason that's why product discovery for most products boils down to a lot of prototyping and a lot of testing of those prototypes. And with different people, we obviously test prototypes with customers, but we also test them with our key stakeholders, and we test them with engineers. Now, the engineers are really testing a prototype for two different things. One is to see, is there anything in this proposed solution that would raise red flags, like maybe big legacy system dependencies or tech debt issues or something. If there's a problem in this direction, we want to know now, not later, right? So that's the first thing we ask the engineers to look at. And the second thing we ask them to do is to say, look, now that you know what we're trying to do, is there a better way to do this? Is there a better way? Maybe there's a more relevant technology that could be used. Maybe there's a different approach. What is it? So that's why we ask them to spend a few minutes of the day playing with the latest prototype. Now, just to be explicit here, because this is so important, and I'm saying this intentionally because so many teams that tell me they're agile, they really aren't agile in any meaningful sense. But if the first time your engineers are seeing your product ideas is at sprint planning, you have failed on all this. So that should be the last time they see it, because then they're going to build it. But they should have been, in the prior days and weeks, seeing the prototypes of these ideas evolving from the beginning.
Do you see any major paradigm shifts that may be upcoming in the future that could impact the way we think about building products and the product model itself?
Well, first of all, predicting the future is super hard. But what I think I can do is talk about why the books, even the first edition, is still relevant today. And that's because this is what I was taught. We don't focus on processes which change all the time. We don't focus on sort of fads. What you focus on are principles and then the techniques. The principles honestly have not changed since I first learned product, which was a long, long time ago. I mean, literally more than 30 years ago. So the principles have not changed. What has changed are the techniques are much better. They just are way better. Look at the reason Figma is worth $20 billion is because they do a great job in the tools for creating the prototypes that we use in product discovery. So it's a terrific product for that. And so the tools are so much better than they used to be. The techniques are so much better. Whether somebody likes using a certain technique or not, they always come in and out of fashion all the time. But that's so we try to focus on those principles. And I encourage, when I coach product people, I encourage them to focus on the principles. Now those principles are likely to be put to a real test in the next few years with generative AI. So far, those principles look solid, especially for the companies that are using generative AI. That said, I do think generative AI will probably, sometimes I'm very optimistic about new technologies. Sometimes I'm overly optimistic. My friends will laugh because they know that's true. I'm like overly optimistic. This is going to fix longstanding problems. It's going to be great. And, it's rarely that good. But even if it's not terrific, generative AI has the opportunity to change some of the longstanding problems that have existed. And I would just love it if that happens. I think it would make teams feel a whole lot more empowered and a whole lot more autonomous. And just basically people love and enjoy their job more. So there's some real potential. Just like any new technology, there's also the potential that it's used for terrible reasons and people just get worse at their job, not better. It's very possible because one of the things I've learned is that many people are looking for alternatives to thinking.
Yeah. I call it thinking outsourcing.
That's right. And of course, that's the first reaction of a lot of people with ChatGPT. It's like, oh, I'll just leave the thinking to that. And that would be a very bad decision. But on the other hand, if it's used as a complement and an accelerator and an amplifier of our thinking, that could be very powerful.
And that's a very nice final word, Marty. I appreciate you joining me in this podcast, and thanks a lot for sharing all that wisdom.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Good luck.
Thank you.